we speak about sacramental life. So not just moments in which a sacrament is to be performed. I suspect all of you here will have had mystical experiences of some kind. Maybe in prayer you have a thought that turns out to be transformative, transforming your life. A little spark of the divine in you. Mystical life is, and we participate in that mystical life every time we make a prayer, every time we seek a blessing, every time we receive Holy Communion, and so on and so forth. But something that is equally real is not a symbol, something that transforms. And that transformation is an ontological transformation as well, or it becomes an ontological transformation. It's not only a symbol, because if it is only a symbol, then it is no longer a transformation. Explaining that much of the Orthodox, modern Orthodox presentation of the sacraments is very much based on Latin theology. And this creeped in through the textbooks, the Latin textbooks that were translated in Russia and even in Greece around the time of the 16th century. Before that, there was a lot of, let's say, communication between the Latin Church and the Byzantines. We know of the two famous councils, Lyon and Florence, was it? Yeah, where there was an attempt or attempts made by Michael Palaiologos to unify, if you like, to unify theology and realize some kind of a restoration of communion. And this was, of course, on the backdrop of a very weak Byzantine Empire. A weak Byzantine Empire which sought its finding points of contact with the West. So through these Latin textbooks, we came in the Orthodox Church to speak about 7 sacraments, to speak about a very legalistic and scholastic understanding or difference between rites and sacraments. And the sacraments are fixed and there is no change. They must be biblical as well, which is very difficult to argue, especially from the Orthodox perspective. And according to these manuals, according to these textbooks, the sacrament requires 3 elements. One is the material or the substance of the sacrament. In the case of, for example, the Holy Eucharist, we have the bread and the wine. In the case of the baptism, we have the water. In the case of chrismation, we have the holy oil, and so on and so forth. The second element is a prayer of invocation, words that call on the Holy Spirit or on God to come and transform the physical elements or the substance that's presented. And the third element that's required for a sacrament to be a valid sacrament, according to the Latin textbooks, is the cleric, or the one who actually does the praying, if you like. So without either of them, an action of the Church is not considered, according to Latin theology, to be a sacrament. But this is very foreign to Orthodoxy. All of it is very foreign to Orthodoxy. Because, not only because it's legalistic and sort of narrow and tries to explain too much, but it introduces all sorts of conditionings, if you like. All of a sudden, Orthodox theology has to explain itself in why we have the sacraments that we have. For example, where do we find the institution of the sacrament of Holy Unction in the Bible? Nowhere. We have references to in Jude, for example, or in the Epistle of St. James, I believe, a call for the ministers or the priests of the church to come and pray for those who are sick or infirm. But we don't have an institution by the Lord himself. We may trace back all sorts of things to the Holy Apostles, but arguing that it has to be apostolic in order for it to be recognized as a sacrament, this is very problematic for the Orthodox. In fact, when we speak about sacraments in the Orthodox Church, we speak about sacramental life. So not just moments in which a sacrament is to be performed, but rather our entire lives being a communion with God. Because there is no point at which we are not in communion with God if we seek that communion. This is why in the Orthodox Church, rather than using the word sacrament, we use a different word, a Greek word, mysterion. Mysterion is perhaps better understood in English, not by the word mystery, which implies something we do not know, it's a mystery, but mystical. Something mystical means that the understanding or the meaning of it is beyond our capacity. It's not that the meaning does not exist, but the meaning is out of our grasp. This is what in the Greek mysterion means. It is something beyond us, something that transcends our limited field of view. Our limited field of view sees with the physical eyes only the substance or the visible part. But there is always something beyond the physicality of our experience. We appreciate that the Lord and the spiritual world may be invisible to us, but no less real than the physical world. Just like with our own eyes we can see this carpet, with the spiritual eyes we could see the invisible world, but it is not something that is readily available to us. So the word mysterion and the mystery of the Church, like I said, the mystical aspects of life, those are experiences of the Christian from the very beginning. I suspect all of you here will have had mystical experiences of some kind. Those times when a thought comes to your mind and you seem to understand more than you did before. Maybe in prayer you have a thought that turns out to be transformative, transforming your life. A little spark of the divine in you. This is the mystical. This is something unexplainable by reason. Or rather, something that we should not seek to explain by reason and fall into the trap of scholasticism. So the mystical life of the Church, or the sacramental life of the Church, means partaking of the reality that is beyond us. And so we do not have just 7 sacraments, but we have many elements of sacramental life. Or otherwise, it would be difficult to justify why holy matrimony, for example, is a sacrament, while the monastic tonsure is not. Why the mystery or the sacrament of Holy Unction is a sacrament, but the adoption of a child is not. Splitting these up between sacraments and rites is not helpful at all, because it implies that one has less participation in the divine. It implies that the rites are sort of casual blessings, whereas a mystery or a sacrament is something very serious. In fact, all sacramental life is very serious. And sacramental life happens even outside of the church. Famously, we have one sacrament or mystery, the mystery of Holy Unction, which doesn't necessarily happen in the church. But it happens always with the church present. Because sacraments and sacramental life cannot be outside of the church. Because the church is the space in which the divine and the human meet. It is the experience or the reality in which the spiritual world meets the human world. This ineffable presence of the divine. I said that sacraments never happen outside of the church, even those that may not take place inside the building of the church. And this is because sacraments are not hidden away. They're always public. Even the sacrament of confession is not something that we do in a confessional, where the two, the penitent and the priest, do not know each other or interact only through words. They are very personal. They are meetings between God, ourselves, in the presence of the church or in the context of the church. And that context of the church or the presence of the church can take the appearance of, let's say, the priest celebrating that mystery, or the entire church, the communion of the saints in the body, coming together. As in the sacraments of Holy Baptism, Holy Chrism, Holy Communion. So, therefore, the church is always present, or rather the church is the context in which the mystical life of the church happens. Nobody can say that without any participation in the church, they may take part in this mystical life of the church. Not even a monk living in the desert, completely isolated, would have this conscience that they would not be part of the church. That what they do, their unmediated communication or communion with God, is outside of the church. Because if that is the case, then that is not, by definition, mystical experience. Now, there are many things that we may not understand about the Holy Mysteries, but there are also many things that we do understand about Holy Mysteries. We understand that there is a so-called apostolic succession, which empowers the Church to preserve the mystical realities and the mystical rites of the Church. And that apostolicity of the mystical life is very precious, especially in the Orthodox context. It is precious because we understand that the same sacraments being realized in our days have been repeated over and over again, to a point where we may understand that the mystical life is something we kind of access, not something that we create. Mystical life is, and we participate in that mystical life every time we make a prayer, every time we seek a blessing, every time we receive Holy Communion, and so on and so forth. Participation, not just witnessing, but participation. Of course, the first and most important mystical element of the Church is the Holy Eucharist. The sacrament, by definition, is the Holy Eucharist. And in the early days of the Church, every other sacrament would happen around the Eucharist. So, for example, the baptisms were part of baptismal liturgies. The Holy Matrimony happened within the Divine Liturgy. And the order of service in the Orthodox Church today still retains elements of that Eucharistic celebration from the first centuries. So, for example, in the mystery of Holy Matrimony, we have the so-called common cup that the couple drinks from, and that, of course, in the early practice of the Church would have been the Holy Eucharist, now replaced by a simple cup of wine. Or in the sacrament of baptism, many elements are similar to what we find in the Divine Liturgy, such as the threefold hymn, as many of you as have been baptized in the Christ have put on Christ, Alleluia. So gradually, and I suspect that it happened for practical reasons, these sacramental rites have been disconnected, at least temporarily, from the Divine Liturgy. But they should never happen outside of the liturgy of the Church. And of course, by liturgy, I don't just mean the Eucharistic celebration, I mean the liturgical life of the Church. So all these sacraments are ways or tools for our participation to be more profound in God. What we in the Orthodox Church would call the process of deification, of which I know many of you have heard. The process of deification is one by which we become Christ-like. We become more and more like Christ. Not only by doing what Christ has done and has instructed his holy apostles to do, but also by being the apostles that Christ teaches, by being more and more closer to him. And this closeness happens, as in the human context, and as in the social world, by participation. I cannot become closer to my parents unless I see them, unless I speak to them, unless I communicate with them. I have to have that closeness with them and that personal relationship in order for me to say that I am following them or I am respecting them. So being in the Church, partaking of the sacramental life of the Church means participation in the divine, by cultivating the divine in us, invoking the divine to come and bestow the grace of the Holy Spirit upon us. And so every sacrament or every sacramental action that we do in our lives is somehow connected to the Holy Eucharist and equally connected, of course, to our process of deification. And nothing is sort of minor or secondary. Like, for example, the blessing of the waters is a sacrament in the Orthodox Church, precisely because there is a visible component which has an invisible component as its counterpart. Something that happens in the blessing of the water is the prayer of the invocation of the Holy Spirit, which points us to the fact that what we see in the physical element of the water is going to be transformed. And this is the definition, if you like, of the mystical. Something that is transformed into something else. You take, an object that has no spiritual value and turn it into something that is working your salvation through. The holy water, for example, is not a magical element, is not something that, transforms without our participation. But it is something that through our participation, transforms our life, or we transform our life through participation in the divine. So this is very important to remember, that in the sacraments, in the sacramental life of the Church, we seek a transformation. And that transformation is an ontological transformation as well, or it becomes an ontological transformation. It's not only a symbol, because if it is only a symbol, then it is no longer a transformation. If I look at an apple and I call it a pear, what transformation happens there? It's only a symbol, it's only a metaphor. I see something I call something by something that I don't see. However, in the sacramental action, that thing actually changes its nature, because it is impacted or transformed by the divine presence. Anything that the Lord touches has a different use, if you like, which is why we have holy vestments, we have holy relics, we have holy chalice, we have the Holy Cross. By calling them holy, we recognize that their nature was transformed, and they are now tools through which our salvation is worked, our tools for our process of deification. From next time onwards, we will be looking at specific sacraments and try and understand what they are and how they work, why they are ways by which our transformation happens. We will try and look at each individual sacrament, and also, like I said, go beyond the 7 that we find in the Latin context. The Holy Fathers speak about sacraments as being far more generously imparted than we see in Latin theology. I'm sorry for making all these references back to Latin theology. The reason is because of the impact that Latin theology had over the last few centuries in what the mysteries or the sacraments is concerned. And this impact is not entirely negative, but also it contains negative elements which need to be taken out in order to preserve the early understanding of the sacrament. And so I was saying that early fathers such as Saint Dionysius the Areopagite speaks about sacraments. I think he calls 6 mysteries sacraments, and it includes, of course, the burial service, which is not included in the 7 sacraments in the Latin theology. They speak about these sacraments, or the mystical life that the Christian lives, as windows by which we access the divine reality. And initially it may look like these rituals are nothing other than rituals. You know, it's something that perhaps looks pretentious or pompous. The priest wears lavish vestments that look very expensive, uses very expensive chalice and paten and so on and so forth. We have processions, we have all sorts of elements that are really part of the Byzantine practice from the imperial context, which was indeed lavish and very, very developed. But the reality remains the same. What is performed in those sacraments is something mystical, something that is beyond our understanding, but something that is equally real, is not a symbol, something that transforms. And there are many situations where reports of people being able to see that transformation or discern that transformation, either at the time of that mystery or later on.